just like that.
This is Carleton Eastlake, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
Hey, look, we love having authors that do things on the show. We love having fascinating people on the show. We collect a lot of Carleton. We collect a lot of the most interesting people in the world. You have led a fascinating life, and I try to capture it in the notes. I mean, look, your bio legitimately is like a whole page long. Most people are like 90 words or less, and you're like, and then I was at the Federal Trade Commission, and then I worked for NASA, and then it was just this long list of fascinating things. Have you figured it out?
Yeah, I think I'm Forrest Gump. I played a minor role in a lot of things.
Right. Yeah. Why
So,
is that?
I'm very restless. I get really tired of things. When I was producing television, I never gave options. It's
Right.
surprising how easy it is. Everyone is always tying themselves up for the rest of their lives of options. Now, for actors, yes, you need them for continuity. It's astonishing how if they really believe you're not going to do it, they do not insist on taking on an option. I try and do my best in my first, like if I'm doing episodes, my first two, three, four ideas, and then I'm on to the second best.
Yeah.
I think we see that a lot of times in public culture, but
Mm.
I'm restless.
Yeah.
Also, it took me
Restless.
half my life to find myself. So,
Well, this goes back to the first question. But before we get back to that, I want to I just point out that you in your bio you talk about writing episodes for V, and those
yeah.
of us who are of that age absolutely remember that crazy. It was such a leap in terms of TV. It didn't hold, it didn't stick, but boy, there was a lot of brilliance in that TV series. I mean, a lot of us tried to imitate how the aliens talked and everything,
Oh,
with
wow.
that, with the split vocal. Oh yeah, I mean, it was a real thing. So when I saw that, I'm like, oh my god. And also, let's not race past this because this isn't in the zeitgeist anymore, but for sure in the early 80s, Who Shot JR mattered, and you
Yeah.
helped us figure that out. You actually wrote that episode, is that right?
Well, no, my wife wrote that episode.
Wife wrote. Okay.
I got to watch her write that episode
Nice.
and to bodyguard her. Hopefully, if you talk like the aliens in V, you didn't try and eat like them, though.
Mm.
That would have been too exciting.
Yeah. So have you
But for
figured it
those who
out?
don't know, the
Yeah.
aliens ate large rats whole. So
Yeah. Yeah. And they were everywhere. So have you figured it out? I mean, you've done all these things,
yes.
you've had all these changes, you were restless. Are you no longer restless?
Well, I'm restless because I mean, of course, none of us have figured it out. We're not immortal, and Russia is still bombing Ukraine, so we haven't figured it out 100%.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, I do feel that I have figured it out. In part, that's why I wrote the book. I wanted to pass on some of what I had learned
Mm.
about the avenues to figuring things out. By the way, if you have figured things out, it doesn't mean you can do that much about it, but at least you don't make it worse, and maybe you do make things a little better in your own life and in other people's lives. But it took a long time,
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
of my
Well,
life. So,
and one of the things about figuring things out, and this is me sort of asking you, part of it is just knowing that you are restless and that you do need that next challenge, and allowing yourself to like not feel like a failure because you haven't ground yourself to a nub writing the next great episode or doing whatever it is, and part of that figuring out is accepting who you are.
oh yeah, yeah, and I think, but I mean, also part of figuring out is I think coming to a real understanding of how I work and how humans work. Uh, there is so much popularized junk psychology. There's so
Mm,
much popularized self-help in the world that it sometimes obscures that there really are things you can learn about people. There
yeah.
really are things you can learn about yourself that may give you some insight moment to moment or day to day about what's
Yes.
going on and how to
Yes.
deal with it.
No, I love that. There's a author who I've read a lot. And I spent a lot of time overseas in Afghanistan and Iraq, right? So I read this author's book, and she's an ethnographer, and she talks about going into the Pashtun Hills and getting to know the people and slowly like accepting their culture, so she can come back as a more and more closely attuned cultural person to them each time. But what she didn't do is go there with all of their practices down. You certainly could read the books and practice those things. She's like, no, my job is to go in there and live amongst them and see how they live, and slowly become more and more culpable for my actions in their world, to really understand them. And one of the things we talked about is, when we try to go into these situations, whether it's Afghanistan or a new neighborhood, wherever it is very hard to find that point where you are actually acceptable in your behavior, when you truly become, or have the ability to become, that thing, that person, that community, that culture. I don't think we get that. I think we want it to be like snap of a finger. Look, I'm using my hand in this fashion. This means I'm like you. When in reality, you're nothing like them.
Yeah. And I think it's a balance in that there are some real fundamentals. There's some real givens to human behavior, which I touched a little bit on the book, even though the book is a novel, that are rooted in the fact that we're very noisy monkeys. I mean, we're noisy great apes. And is rooted in that, but also then the enormous power of ideology, of fantasy, of making up a narrative and making up a whole complicated explanation of how the world works that quiets us and encourages us and lets us get through the day, but isn't really necessarily have many points of contact with reality. That you really have to master locally from the person, and how their mind is working, and what story they're telling themselves to get through the day, and then maybe how to alter it if it's a bad story that's hurting you or even hurting them. So it's really hard. You said you spent a lot of time in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, am I allowed to ask you, what does that mean? What?
Well, I was a spy for the Army and for the government, and my job was to go outside the camp every day and find out what was going on in town, right, to help us win more. Yeah, and so I spent a lot of time outside the wire when I was there, much more so than my peers. Like, you're not going to be meeting anybody who's got more direct and varied engagement with the local populace than me. It's just, if there's someone else like me, I don't know who they are, because the length of time that I spent there. So I do look at a lot of these cultural things that we have and the way we communicate culturally, and I go, my gosh, this is this is no different than this conflict-ridden place. Why do we have the stability that we have? And it's a tough puzzle to solve, man.
It really is. I may have played you in a simulation. It's not impossible. I
may have played me in a simulation.
Not in my biography is that I did some multi-day simulations, multi-room, multi-day war games for the government, playing the role of a person of interest. Which got very intense. It was very interesting. And I did some futurism work for the Navy, really interestingly, given the circumstances of today with Russia and Ukraine, because it was futurism to popularize a writer, to help them popularize, to dramatize to the future force what these hypersonic and energy directed weapons are going to look like, and what it's going to be like to talk to AI and accept advice from it. So we've had some connection in our careers there.
It makes a lot of sense. And before we go too far, I want everybody to buy Monkey Business. You see the link right there for Amazon, or you can just, look, you can just type in Carleton. Yeah, there it is. You can type in Carleton Eastlake's name, and look, I think there's one Carleton Eastlake. You have one of those unique names. The spelling of Carleton is different. So look, this guy
has an E in the middle.
It has an E in the middle. It has an E.
Here's the book talk revelation. I don't have the soundtrack though.
I know I should have that button right here.
I still love book talk. I can't tell you, but I really do.
Monkey Business, everybody. Monkey Business. That's what you want to get. And Carleton, look, go to Carleton's website and you're going to get an idea of who the heck this cat is. He's incredible. And look, we never know who the most interesting man on the planet is, but you definitely have led that interesting life. And I want to get back into this scenario thing you were talking about. So my job every day was to go off the camp, right, and go talk to people. So how do you replicate that? Well, so I'm in a training program where I'm going through the training, and we're going to do a simulation. And it literally has nothing to do with our day-to-day job. The military's done a great job of providing military training, but they haven't provided the role players and the roles to simulate what it's actually like to go and engage Afghans in this case. And so they let me write a scenario for us to go through because I was the one guy who had the most experience doing this job when we were there. And a lot of what we do is ethnography, is anthropology, stuff that you're schooled in. So we're very similar in this regard, right? And so I wrote this scenario purposely because military always wants like a resolution, like we're going somewhere for 3 days in this exercise, right? And we're actually not leaving anywhere. We're just going to be right here. We're going to have some Afghans brought to us. We're going to talk to a couple of them. And so in my scenario, I purposely wrote no resolution. It was all tension that you couldn't resolve.
Yeah.
And you were forced to deal with that because it turns out, Carleton, you don't get to figure everything out with one visit to a village, but we're desperate to think that we can. So I purposely wrote this tension into these characters. And I purposely briefed the Afghans. It's like, just act like this is a guy coming up to you on a day-to-day. If someone out of the blue walked up to you out there in Hollywood and said, I want to talk to you for 2 hours, and they stuffed you into a booth of a restaurant and talked to you for 2 hours, you're not going to be the most, rapport-filled, trusting person. You're going to have a conversation, may or may not be lovely, but the person on the other end, the person I'm trying to train, they have no idea of that. They think that they're automatically engaging in everything. And so at the end of the day, when they all briefed what they found out during the day, they were coming up with these solutions. And I'm like, I specifically wrote this to have no solutions. I'm telling you, as the guy who wrote the scenario, student, peer, there is no answer. So stop saying that. And they're like, no, you don't understand. And I'm like, no, I understand completely because I wrote the role. There's no answer. You're supposed to just understand that you were talking to someone one time, one day, and you may never talk to them again. What is important about what you discussed? What is important for you to go and do next time you go, when you go do this for real? How do you set up your conversations, understanding that you're not going to learn everything in 1 hour?
But it's amazing how people will be taken in by these scenarios, how non-actors, military intelligence people, if you're doing it right, by day 2, their lives depend on it in the little simulation room. They are totally wired. It is amazing.
Yeah. One of the things about the scenarios that we lose track of as the person in the scenario is that the role player is only as good as their understanding of the mission, right?
Yeah.
And so if I write a role and I say, hey, Carleton, I just don't want you to ever have rapport with this person. I'm not saying treat them poorly, be respectful, do whatever, is normal for you to do, but never grant them rapport, right? And then when my student would come back and say, oh, I had the best rapport with Carleton. I'm like, did you? Because we say things like establish rapport and build trust, but we don't talk about what to do, how to measure it, right? And so you're a guy that understands these emotive things. Like, here is how you create these responses. Do you slow down in your writing and even consider that? The thing I've learned from talking to a lot of you Hollywood folks is the emotion, right? We're like, close on emotion is a great thing that you're supposed to do when you write something. You're trying to open on action, all of these things in between. You're trying to create a feeling. This is all affect driven stuff.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's a little magical where that finally rises in you. But these sort of simulations, even with people, that are soldiers and whatnot, and have never dealt with fiction, shows the capacity we have for that's a type of fantasizing, and the capacity we have to fantasize so vividly in a room with a bunch of other people where we're working a problem that we do begin to feel all that, which in part is actually what the book touches on too, since it touches on the role of this pervasive and invisible almost role of fantasy in our lives, way more than we realize how much we're tuning our emotions and how much we are running a narration in our head that isn't quite true, but really sounds great. And it is amazing when you do that externally in order to actually affect real world policy, how much that does have an effect.
Your story focuses on a guy who basically goes to a strip club and falls in love. The stripper, the siren, the lady who is in front of you, that is her job, right? Is to create this emotional response, and you pull money out of your pocket, you hand it over to the business or to the person, And we see this happening over and over again. There's and maybe you know about this, there's a thing called OnlyFans.
Oh,
And
yes.
there are young people making multi-millions of dollars on
Oh,
this
yeah.
fantasy thing. And it's, I mean, I don't have any account, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, oh my God, this fantasy thing has really been democratized, where someone who's very young can just literally buy a camera like I have here and set up and start a multi-million dollar business where the money just comes flowing in. It's insane.
Well, that's her connection to him. So he, in the book, he's a young writer. He's on location in Florida. He is very lonely. He's really questioning his life. These horrible producers drag him to a high-end strip club.
Mm-hmm.
And they hire, and one of the dancers gets her, very important distinction, as this, don't want to give away too much of the story.
Yeah.
One of the dancers gets herself hired to take him off into, the VIP section and do a number on him, because the guys think that would just be so hysterical if this shy, too moral guy. Instead, she starts interviewing him about creativity and says, "Oh, we're both fabulous. I make up these fantasies for these guys. You make up these fantasies and put them on television." And he is totally nonplussed, fabulous. And she starts interviewing him about creativity and about the evil personalities of these executive producers. And for the first time in his life, meeting someone who is as smart as he is, and with this insight into the human condition that he subconsciously realizes is more penetrating than his, it's love at first sight. Yeah. So it's some enchanted evening. He has met a stranger. He's seen her across a crowded room. And then that powers his story, because, by God, he is limerent, which is what that type of love is. And he desperately wants to win her favor and win her. And she is resistant all the way through. So that is a big quest for him, while he also survives on the show with these terrible people who are more likely to destroy the show than to make it a success.
Boy, I have so many things I want to throw back at you about that. So we a long time ago we had Allie Willis on the show, and you're probably familiar with who Allie Willis is. If not, she has got this old home in we'll just say it's in Burbank, and there it used to be an executive's resort home. So you could bring a bunch of young girls in, throw a party, do a bunch of studio exec kind of things. And you have this element in the entertainment business where you have this virtue signaling thing, we care about a lot of people, but then there's this consumption of humans and lives in a variety of forms, right? So you have this evil side, and then you have this fantasy side. How does that resonate with you when you think about the industry in general, and how does that drive your
it's really hard. I mean, it's interesting you said that. One of the things that most bothers this writer, where he was representing my views, is he has to go into a casting session for a nurse. So here are all these young women in their 20s, 20 of them lined up in the hallway, studying their sides to get this small part. They're only going to hire one.
Right.
And it just devastates him, as it used to devastate me, to tell no to 19 people, particularly when they were young, they were semi-professional, they're just breaking in. And you would have 5 or 10 that were very good. And you'd have another 10 that, miscast, or maybe they shouldn't be in the business. And you'd have to tell them no. And when you're sitting there telling them no, you're telling them you're not getting your SAG points maybe to really join, depending on how young they are. You're losing your health insurance because you haven't been cast and you haven't earned enough points. You got to go and tell your parents and your boyfriend that once again you failed. And you do that to 19 people. And it's I find it the most horrible thing about producing television is casting. And he even says, because the book is said just when casting on video is starting to come in, that thank God you can cast on video. You don't have to face them in the room all the time. It's so much more humane. They don't know why they didn't get it. Maybe I made a bad video. Maybe they never watched it. And you don't have to face them and tell them no. Yeah. But as a wider picture, of course, it is horrible, because this is actually something I'm addressing in the next book, population pressure in our society,
Hmm.
just in the film business. So many kids graduating from film school, from MFA programs to write, from acting programs
Yeah.
to act. And the number of jobs briefly has kind of gone up with the big streaming bubble, but that
Right.
has not gone up in proportion to the number of people that want to do this work. And it hasn't gone up because the population has doubled. Since I was born, the planetary population, I think, has tripled. The
Right.
opportunities haven't tripled. And if you wonder why people are, are rioting around the world, why even America is so divided in what begins to look like tribes competing for scarce resources.
Yeah.
We have forgotten the wisdom of the 60s when people were warning about the population explosion. But the stress is overwhelming. And the stress in the environment, you could cure global warming tomorrow if the population was the population of 1947. It'd be done.
It's a lot easier to be more gentle on the planet if there's less of us.
Yeah, we'd have cut emissions down to a third. We'd have cut plastic consumption at least by half.
Right.
So, but Hollywood is just a pressure cooker of people struggling to get to the top.
Yeah, it is. And I'm trying to look up right now. We had an episode the other day, and we were talking about the financial side of it, right? Because this person,
oh boy, yeah.
I'm going to pull his name up right now, Tim Tortora. Tim works on the CFO level, right, for entertainment companies, and has for decades now. And he came here with a different view. Like a lot of people, he came here to do something, and then where he ended up being perfect for his personality, and he didn't need to be in front of the camera. But boy, he can look at a project and be like, here, and like just see all the money, right? And then also,
that's a magic ability, by the way.
Right. And you've seen this, like it's there, and you're like, I'll be damned, that guy was right. So Tim and I were talking about the number of jobs, right? And you're right, it's exploded. There are streaming services. There are also streaming services that go, like Oprah has done a great job and exited the Oprah sphere into this, massive studio type thing. But that's not going to happen to all of these streamers. They're going to have, CNN Plus just died the other day, right?
Yeah,
so they're not going to be
Whoa.
Right. And they're not going to be the last one, right? And so you have a finite number of jobs.
Netflix is going to be cutting back.
Right. Netflix is cutting back. Disney's trying to sort out how they're going to go forward. Everybody's trying to figure this out because the battle for attention, and again, bringing back OnlyFans in, right? If a person has, let's say, 20 hours of budgetable viewing time, and they give 20% of that to OnlyFans, you're competing with less stuff. So I guess, and I want to make one more little point with this whole thing. When you have all these MFA programs, they're not based upon a need in the marketplace. It's based on the need to sell this dream of having and we're saying an MFA. You go to whatever school you want and you get a BA, and it's like, hey, good luck. Now you have to have an MFA, maybe. So when Tim and I were talking, there's a certain number of jobs. And let's say that, we'll say, and maybe the number's different, but let's say that just over half, not 2/3, but just over half of those jobs are accounted for, right? You're not going to take the job from whatever, whoever the star is, Channing or Tom. I'm thinking of all these different Toms, Sizemore and stuff like all these other people.
And Chris's, they're all Chris.
Oh my God, right? Yeah. So yeah, you're battling with Chris Pine. Well, you're not going to take Chris Pine's job, and the next guy in line with Chris Pine is just like Chris Pine. So you're trying to break in, and you're dealing with, trying to figure these things out. You're right. There are not enough jobs, and there are a lot more people that are academically qualified.
And and it's led to this really pernicious thing. When I did Sequest, so here we were, Spielberg's first series, and probably the most expensive show on television at the time, certainly below the line. Maybe, Roy Scheider was making plenty, but maybe the rest of the above the line wasn't that high. But in terms of real money on the screen, about the most expensive. I was then, and this is, in my lifetime, I was the only person who had finished college on the writing staff.
Right.
The other 4 principal writers involved were like the old Front Page and screwball comedy era. They were high school, college dropouts that mostly had become journalists and gone out and gathered stories, and then they'd broken into Hollywood and very aggressively leading careers as gunslingers in writing their own episodes on that show, even though it was fabulously expensive show. Now it's kids who have gone to college, then they've gone to the MFA. Now they have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. They're very carefully trained. Now they're begging for a writer's assistant job. They're begging to be mistreated 12 hours or 14 hours a day,
right?
To hang around to maybe get a script on the show. And then they get a piece of a script. They don't get their own script. They don't take it to the floor to produce it. It is crushing. I have scenes of that also in here, of what it's like to work as a galley slave, rowing in a story room. It's a lot of awful things have happened in this society as the bureaucratization has completely, absorbed individual ability, individual opportunity, and it is population pressure.
Yeah,
it's people just have to acquire more and more qualifications to climb up the ladder, so someone will read their resume, just to climb that, to acquire the points for the algorithm to pull out their paper for the submissions. It's very hard, very hard.
It is very hard.
Television is very good sometimes.
Yeah.
It's a very polished machine polished, complicated work, but it can be very good.
Yeah. Oh boy, a lot to say right now. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is Tony Toast has become a bit of a friend of the show, if you know Tony's work. And he grew up, poor, white trash, in a trailer, living on the edge of an Indian reservation. He worked at a pickle factory, right? And he gets his first gig in Hollywood, and it's writing for Longmire. And he's like, I am from this world. And so he was uniquely educated through experience to write for this world. However, he also had a PhD in poetry.
Wow.
That he got from Duke, right? And so he also had a command, right? Yeah. So he didn't get to MFA and go that route, but he ended up and he got his PhD, and he's sitting there with his tweed jacket on. He's like, yeah, I'm an academic. And he's like, I hate this. What else can I do? And so he ends up, getting this job at a very low level and then rocketing to the top. That is not how the industry works, as we know. And we see all the time, I don't know, once every 6 months or so, I think we'll see in the LA Times or somewhere in the news where they'll have a baby writer, a junior writer who's like, I live in a van down by the beach in Venice because I can't afford to, I have to focus all of my time on my career. And even though they make what sounds like a lot of money, not here in Southern California. It was funny. I was looking around for some permanent work on the podcast side. And this company they're adorable. They're like, yeah, we want 60 hours a week from you to work. And we're going to pay you $60,000 a year. And I'm like, you realize we're in Southern California. That is those numbers and that time commitment, they're not equal. That's not what professional grade work gets around here, So you have this problem of, you see Tony Toast's success. He climbs up from, all the way up to executive producer on the show in several seasons, but he was uniquely qualified to do it and educated. But the next kid that comes out of USC with $250,000 of debt and the ability to write like crazy, they have the opportunity to submit to a lot of places, but now you're talking independent as opposed to the machine. And then I want to get back to the machine now. And I want you to kind of grab all of this if you can. We see a lot of, the Greeks that wrote sitcoms are the same premises for shows today. And so I've seen I couldn't watch what's that show with all the super smart people on it? Big Bang Theory.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, I've seen all the episodes. I've seen all these episodes. I've watched Cheers. I've watched all these different things. All the premises, they're all the same. Yeah, they're slightly rejiggered and everything, but there's Norm. There's Woody, and so it's hard to, if you've seen all this stuff, I can appreciate the quality of the production, but it's very I don't know. I don't want to say tropey because that's unfair, but let's talk about that.
There are very few patterns in human behavior, and an awful lot of sitcom would be, the way you change sitcom into drama is that they don't lie to each other. They don't get embarrassed and dig themselves deeper and deeper, erecting excuses. They just say what happened. Well, now you're in drama. Right. So, but it is very human. No, it is fascinating. When I was teaching at UCLA, I would start them off with Aristotle. Aristotle's rules in the Poetics absolutely still apply to television and film today. And of course, uh, the Odyssey has almost all the tropes of an action film, going
Right.
behind enemy lines of your buddy and quipping and climbing through the air vents to get the weapons, which he does in his home when he kills the bachelors at the end, the suitors at the end. It is all in there, and they cooked it up back in 800 BC. So a lot of these are sort of patterns, and again, it is the patterns of human behavior, and it keeps playing on them because some of those patterns are very, very repetitive and very simple. I mean, almost any film that works has a status or self-esteem story, which is really primate dominance story, achieving primate dominance, and a bonding story, a love story. And then it has the problem of the day. So, the archetypical one, although now it's years ago, is Die Hard. Well, he's losing his wife and his sense of status and importance to evil executive, at the company. And then he could save the president of the company, but he blows it. And then he's saying to himself, you blew it, da, 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 da. So he feels awful about himself, and everyone's looking down on him. And at the same time, he's losing his wife in multiple ways. First, he was losing her romantically. Then he's going to lose her to these criminals. Then, and fighting your way through the building is just an illustration of achieving a sense of self-worth again and winning the girl. Titanic is ultimately the ultimate love story and the dominant story. Poorest boy, right? No status, no dominance, not an alpha male. Poorest boy. And he wins the alpha girl. And so much of film just repeats that with a different camouflage for each film. And even people who write film don't get that. They have not really locked into the psychology of it, and I think even they're afraid to, because they're afraid then they'll become too repetitive, they'll be too transparent. Which could be true.
It could, and maybe they need to be those things to maintain their job, because sometimes you just have to give. You don't have to be great. You just have to give exactly what that producer needs. And maybe you feel like you've got more in you, but he also got a house to pay for, And so you don't have to know who Aristophanes or Euripides are. You don't have to learn. You just know, like, this is what I have to do, right? And I guess this goes back to this whole thing of like getting an MFA and screenwriting, and you're competing with a comedian who doesn't have to even think about these things. She just writes it. It just comes out of them, and they're fast. This is the other thing, like, you realize how fast people can write a page of dialogue, which for everybody listening, it's about a minute worth of the show. And they can, like, someone will say, hey, Carleton, I need you to do a rewrite on this 200 pages and have it to me, I don't know, tomorrow morning. And you're like, yeah, too easy. I'll be done in about 200 minutes.
Well, we talked about V. That was my very first show. I went in, they had me sign a log saying Writers Guild freelance interview. And they said, well, we're all staff written, but thanks for coming in and signing the log. And I said, wait, no, you don't get it. I'm ready to pitch a freelance episode. And they sat down with great weariness and said, okay, go ahead and do it. And I had 30 pages of notes. So I pitched them an episode, and they went, hey, wait, our show. If we had any openings, or when we get a pickup, we'll buy your story. Well, that is great. But, we're all staff written. I went home, and my wife said, actually, they want you to come back tomorrow. When I went back tomorrow, they said, we're all staff written, and we're entirely booked up, except that we have a show that no one's assigned to it, and we have run out of staff, so you've got to do it. And I said, great. When is it prep? And they said 2 days ago. And I laughed. And he said, no, look at the board. To start prepping 2 days ago. You have 5 days for story and teleplay before it shoots. And so, you do have to write fast sometimes. And in that case, it was my very first. I really had to write fast.
Yeah. You really want this, kid? Here you go. We already started production. We don't know what the story is. I'll see you in a few hours.
But it's exactly what you said, Pete. if you know what you're doing, and I was really lucky that I knew the show so well and had
Right.
written a lot of scripts, so I'd broken down a lot. If you really know what you're doing, yes, you can do it very fast. You can.
Yeah.
I have done many an hour of television. I and one or two or three other people have done the whole hour over the weekend.
Right.
When something was really in trouble, you lost an actor, or a set burned down,
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
If you know what you're doing, yes, you can do it fast. But it's hard to get to that point sometimes.
I want to ask you a question about a show that I used to watch because it used to be good. Now I kind of watch it because we've always watched it, but I'm so disengaged from it. That show, The Goldbergs, right?
Yeah,
They
I've
two of
only
the best.
seen it once. I mean, we're in a 500 show universe plus
Yeah,
thousands of shows
yeah.
in the library. So
The premise is great. The guy who produced it, he was, a young up and coming guy in the 80s, and he videoed a lot of things. And so they'll take these stories from his life and they write things. Sometimes they're off that, and they probably ran out of actual VHS videotapes because at the end of it, they'd be like actual people from this actual story. And it was great. But then, like, this whole this movement to try to figure out socially what we're going to do, right? So Brian Callen's a hilarious comedian, great, perfect in the role he was in, and it's like, well, he may or may not have done some stuff, so he's off the show. He's not fired, but we're just not going to have him around anymore. Okay, that's fine. And then the other big comedian on the show is the dad on the show, right? And they're like, okay, he's not fired, but he's not going to be on the show anymore. And just the way he's like, and by the way, he's like, I'm a comedian. I do funny things. I work in a certain way. You guys have known this. I've been around for a while. And they all agree that they're just going to break up. Here's the thing. Here's the question, right? The dad character is central to a lot of things. He plays the standard tropey dad, like, what? What's going on? I'm confused, And then every now and then, once a season, he gets to show his heart. They didn't kill him off. They've CGI'd him. They've taken old clips of him being like, stupid dad, right? But they didn't just kill him off. And so they've given themselves this problem of like the CGI dad thing. Oh my God. It was like, why not just have a very special moment where dad dies and then be done? Why are they keeping him alive when he's not even on the damn show anymore? Does that make sense at all?
I have not seen it, so I don't know.
Right.
But CGI, everybody is proliferating. I mean, my God, on the Mandalorian,
Yeah.
Luke Skywalker is getting younger and taller. I mean, they picked a very different body double to reconstruct this young Luke Skywalker. I think it all goes back. The first time, and SAG was in a dither over it, was Blood Diamonds. And Blood Diamonds, I think Jennifer Connelly was given digital makeup of A tier. They just wanted one tear to punctuate the scene. And she, at the very end, and she was given one tear digitally. And that sort of was the start of something. Though I have to say, Outer Limits, which I ran, maybe did the first digital makeup, and we did not get credit for it. Lou Diamond Phillips had a prosthetic that was tearing along his cheek line. And our visual effects supervisor, who was amazing, said, Steve Anker, I think his name was, said, I can fix it in post, which was the lie. Lou trusted us and did it, and we gave him new makeup digitally.
Yeah.
Because we had a digital, we did not have much of a digital shop ourselves. We did for Outer Limits, but we had freelancers literally around the planet working 24 hours a day. That may have been the first really extensive digital makeup, but now they're digitally creating actors. And I mean, they're taking, pregnant actors and making them not pregnant. And so, Wonder Woman.
Okay,
some of the actual footage from Wonder Woman, she's quite the superhero because she's pregnant and flying. So
I want to back up to this Goldberg thing, and I know you haven't seen the show, but as someone who's run shows and everything else, when they're like, okay, we got to pay Morty no matter what, because that's just in the contract and everything. Why don't we keep him alive and just not have him around? He's an asshole, right? And so why doesn't someone go, why don't we kill him off? Like, do you have to pay him his full freight for CGI?
Yeah, I don't know what I mean.
Or do you
not
have
a
to pay him
problem
in
that had to
addition?
directly address. Some line producer has said, well, you know, we're going to have to pay them SAG minimum at least for that if they agree to it. It depends on what contract they had with them or whether they can get the rights at all, or he or the agent, can say, no, you can't keep doing it unless they have a contract for it.
Right.
And then I don't know. I have no idea. I am very sure that there are appearance fee conflicts in SAG with what happens when you're trying to do more than just reuse a flashback clip, but you're really using it as new material.
Right.
And these battles come up as technology progresses. Right. So
yeah, you might end up paying him twice, like for whatever he's getting paid to be on the show but not show up. And then also, oh, by the way, by using my digital representation, you also have to pay me this, and like now you made even more money. I don't know. It's just such
I have always wondered what James Bond, the Daniel Craig James Bond series paid to keep picturing and dreaming about Vesper in every episode and occasionally showing her image. What was the deal for reuse of her rights, at least in a static image and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. These are the
Eva Green is the longest running Bond girl and doesn't appear in the films, but her memory dominates them.
Yeah.
Which I think any memory of Eva Green would. She's one of the most amazing and actresses who have done anything.
I want to mention the book again, Monkey Business. That's ultimately why you're here talking about that.
Yes, the book.
There it is, Monkey Business. Would you guys just buy this thing? Come on, help me out.
Yeah,
buy Monkey Business and then read it. You're gonna love it. When you is it available on audio?
It is not available on audio yet.
Yeah.
New writer with a new book. The audio companies don't want to put the money into audio. It's become, as well as you're in the business, has become really expensive to produce.
Yeah.
Because Amazon has such high standards that if you have a click in the background on it's that much of a click, and they reject the track. It has to be rescrubbed, that sort of thing. So no, it's on ebook and it's on paper.
Okay.
Worldwide, I might add.
Yeah.
Get it in Australia, get it in the UK. And it's any bookstore in the US will probably have copies, and all of them have it on their website now. We're talking about pre-sale. It goes on sale May 3rd. But everybody's selling the pre-sales now.
Yeah. Pre-sales is like that allows you to get another printing later on. I mean, it's just so important. It's become so, all of these things are just crazy, man. Like all this stuff. And by the way, you mentioned the audio quality of books, and you hear there's an era where like stuff could get through the gate, and it's still there for Audible. But now, even like the inflection of, okay, we'll take a break and come back, and then they just come back with a fresher voice, and you hear that shift. Where you hear that, I hear the edit all the time, and I'm like, oh, there's an edit there where they redid a section. Even that stuff is like starting to disappear,
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy. Or like when they switch mics, you're like, you just switched mics, but I can hear those things. But
well, I switched lighting a few minutes ago, and people probably have noticed that and are going, I just turned it a little redder down here. But also the book for an audio producer has a problem that it really would be best with two voices. And that increases, I am told, the whole expense by about, another third, another half.
Yeah.
Because you really need two voice performers, because the guy has a very distinct voice and he's going through a lot, and it's from his viewpoint, but he tells us a lot of what she said. We hear a lot of what she said, and she has a very distinct voice. Also, she would have to be performed amazingly, I think, or to really, it would be too concrete. What she is saying and the effects she's having on him would be too concrete, unless Scarlett Johansson to do the voice. It's hard to do as an audible book, but one hopes they will do it. Audible books are They're only a small percent of the marketplace, and people that love them really do love them.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a subscription. I've had it, and pretty much always listen to the books. Not every single time. There's certain books I have to go back to, but I think that product in general can be improved dramatically. Like, imagine if it's Monkey Business and they give you an extra 200 pages,
Yeah.
to make a unique product. Hey, now with even more Monkey Business, right, or whatever it's going to be. I can see these things being a lot more audio. Look, when Gary Sinise reads a book professionally, oh my God, I'll buy the book on his ability to perform it, because you just know you're going for a great ride. There's tons of great voices, but there's that next level of entertainment value in that. That's why I definitely see the audiobook market exploding in that way, where they are more expensive projects, but you've got 10 million people paying whatever it is, $20 a month. That's a lot of money there too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it depends on why you're reading or listening to it. Of course, it's great when you're driving and you can't read.
Yeah.
So audible books are very important for that. On the other hand, sitting and reading at like night, I read so fast, I get very impatient with a audible book, because it's going a lot slower than I would be reading the book. And then, of course, sometimes their personality, the flip side is their personality is coloring the characters.
Yeah.
And I hear the character differently when I read it myself inside my ears. So I don't know. It's just different ways of presenting the material. Of course, I'm mostly used to that since, I wrote television for 25 years.
Right. Does it drive you a little crazy to know that I listen to books sometimes as much as 2.7 speed?
Well, yeah, and I will do that. I'll actually do that with YouTube things. Particularly
for sure. Yeah.
Particularly if they're real narration and the images are what counts. It's not people like us brilliantly talking, but it's, look at this car and it's amazing. And I'm driving it and you're going, why don't you say how much faster you're driving it? Let's, so I'll speed them along. Yes.
Yeah.
But, if you run it too fast, I had a Goodreads review where someone complained that the book was too intelligent to easily skim. I was like, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
That was the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
The point was to write a good book that you don't just want to skim.
Yeah.
But people people skim through. They just want to grab the story and move on to the next one. And that does happen.
I will say this too, and I don't get to read completely every book that is sent to me, because I just get a lot of books, and it's too time consuming, and I don't have an assistant to read them for me and give me notes and everything. So I don't always get to do it, but I do try to spend some time with each physical book I get in that space and time, and read through the book as much as I can to get a sense of what's going on. But there are some books where I need to read through a couple of times, especially like if it's nonfiction and it's really like outside of my comfort zone, or I'm being taught something. And then it helps also for me to listen to it as well. So I'll take it in two different forms. Yeah. And what author doesn't love that? Like, hey, Pete had to slow down and really chew on this thing, and it really provided me a lot of new knowledge. We're all hoping for something like that. I love reading a book that forces me to take it out of 2.7 speed and bring it down to 1 and really be in it. And then, read it too. Because something about reading the words at the pace that they're read, that they're presented, there's something in that too, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it all depends. And of course, then we go see Shakespeare and we see it presented 27 different ways and abridged and by every type of actor. So, it's all part of a person's life and how they manage, particularly since we're talking about a novel here.
Yeah.
It's how they manage their experience of a fantasy that someone else has worked up for them, and what elements they want to influence their experience of that fantasy.
Yeah, and the book he's pointing at is called Monkey Business. It's available all places, but Amazon is where I'm putting a link for it right there. There it is, Monkey Business.
There it is.
And you can also go to
cover. I love the artist who did the cover.
No, the cover is fantastic, and it's got that old comic booky imagery to it. It's cool.
Yeah.
And then there's the website for Carleton Eastlake, carletoneastlake.com. Hey, you said something off mic that I want to get into now. And I'm fascinated. My girlfriend and I were just talking about the oldest person in the world just passed away the other day. They were 119 years old. So basically slightly older than Flight,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So this is incredible to be like, you're not that old. But in the old days, 50 years ago, you at this age, you'd likely be dead, or gone. I mean, you read about like the Hollywood folks from 60 years ago. It's like they'd smoke and drank and used up their body way faster. I mean, Babe Ruth was dead at 53, for crying out loud.
Oh, yeah.
So you've been through a lot. You've seen a lot. You've seen a massive change culturally. You went to military school in Orange County.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What do you think about all the stuff that we're seeing? And do people understand how much progress and how special a place the United States is? Or do we only see the here and the now and only the horrible?
Yeah, no, I don't think people realize how incredibly fast things have progressed. And, Steven Pinker in part tried to document that story in Better Angels of Our Nature, which I don't know why I want to sell his book. He hasn't written me back yet, but tried to document how rapidly, particularly over the past few hundred years, humankind has changed. Weirdly, you can even see it in the war today going on in Ukraine, where as horrendous as Russia's behavior has been, it's not as horrendous as it was during World War II. Even Russian society has been drawn into relatively a more humanitarian, existential position. But for the rest of us, the big struggles, which sometimes seem worth, storming the Capitol and having terribly divided politics, yet the base level that they're being argued from has shifted enormously, even in my lifetime, and really shifted over the past 500 years.
Yeah.
We're not torturing animals for fun at a bear baiting contest.
Right.
It's things have really, really improved and very fast. Humankind is evolving at an enormous speed. And of course, again, the characters talk about that quite a bit, of the race of humankind evolving their ability to destroy themselves or save themselves. I mean, if you think about it, if you get people that live to be 70 and to pass on the baton, like standing in my not very large living room, it only take 30 of them since the time of Christ. I mean, wow, have we developed fast for all of our 12 steps forward and 11 steps back. And, it's amazing how fast humans are improving, but also how horribly they're stressing themselves and stressing the planet as they do it. But yes, in that sense, I'm optimistic, but think it could all be lost in a flash.
Well, yeah, we're surely a very angry ape in general. When we talk about the ape world, we love to fight and everything else. We also love to pick that we're passionate about, but don't do anything about it. Like, we're desperate about Ukraine, but what are we willing to do about it? Are we as desperate about Myanmar? No. Are we as desperate about Yemen? No. So we have all of these conflicts. We're like, we need to pay attention to this. You have to, you must. It's like, I don't have time. I'm still worried. I'm still working on the Syrian crisis and the humanity, the atrocity that's still going on there.
Absolutely. I mean, we do not react the same. Freudian would say, where do we extend our ego boundaries, our identification with our own, kind, or an anthropologist might talk about our tribalism, or what is Gemeinschaft and what is Gesellschaft. Obviously, the Western democratic world has adopted Ukraine, has recognized it as one of us, which is a great tragedy for Russia, which did not expect that to happen. So we react very differently. We react as though they kind of our tribe. They look almost like they belong in our tribe.
Yeah.
And
So do the Russians, by the way.
yeah. Yeah, there's a little debate on whose tribe they belong in.
Yeah.
But and this is not rational. It's not. It is a process you can understand in humans. I think you see the same process in a monkey colony. You really do.
Yeah.
Of what they feel is part of their colony and their in group and their out group and the various,
Right.
because monkeys have political circles, they have political parties. Uh, but it's very complicated for humans. And actually, when he isn't mooning over his love story and very desperate to figure out the secret of this girl and how can he win her, he is reading the book she told him he had to read about monkeys and applying it to the producers in his office who are behaving in exactly the same way. They're forming alliance, stacking alliances. Monkeys actually physically stack on top of each other. And you see these, I've never looked at these photographs of politicians all stacked together, behind their leader in front of a microphone in the dark suits. They look exactly like monkeys that are stacked together to try and gain political power in some monkey colony. It's the same photo. It's amazing. So, yeah. But are things getting better? Yes, they're getting better, but we could blow it all and then they'd be not only awful, they would not even exist. We'd all be dead.
And there's work to do. And if we could all ease up on each other and try to find things that we're like, hey, let's all work on this. We
a lot of work to do.
We get incredible things done. And we don't need the list because all you got to do is look around. You mentioned Pinker's book. Also, another book that I thought was just fantastic is a guy named Timothy McIntosh Smith. And he wrote the 3,000 year history of the Arabs.
Oh, wow.
And if you want to understand how little you know about anything, you just start reading this tome. And you're just like, we have no idea what we're doing. And so I want to bring this back to anthropology, and then we'll close it out. But because of part of what I did was, look at spine, but also anthropology, because these things kind of go together.
Oh, yeah. You were very much an anthropologist.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your life depended on it.
So one of the things that I've written academically about in the peer-reviewed paper is how inappropriate it is for us, even though we're desperate to do it. It's inappropriate for us to go out and try to improve the condition of women in these conflict zones. And it's not because we're not desperate to do it, but we're not desperate to do the work to earn the right to do it. When you look at like the anthropologists and the ethnographers and the amount of time and effort it takes, we just don't tolerate that. And so it actually is inappropriate to go and approach these things, even though, and again, like I always talk about this, but when I would talk about this paper to females in particular, we talk about female empowerment. They're like, which females? And I'm like, oh, we're already in a fight. I'm saying if we're going to do this, and we agree it's important, we have to actually act like it's important and be delicate and be deliberate and make mistakes. We can't just go in and say, now you can quilt. Woman empowered, this stuff's way harder than that. And when we look at these problems, we have to understand you get to get mad and do something about probably one of them. And it's going to be a multi-decade process, and your impact will probably be zero. Expect that to happen. And then you can go work in that field because you're in the right frame of mind. You're just going to slowly work your way through this impossible problem. But we do tend to make progress.
I think we do. And war has become a horrible thing to say, but war has relatively become more humane. I mean, if this were 50 years ago, the Russians would be using weapons of mass destruction and getting away with it.
We would be too.
We did.
Yeah.
Everyone did in World War II.
Yeah.
Now we have largely constrained them from doing so. That alone is progress. But until you stop having dead babies, you haven't quite achieved the goal. But maybe you're working further along to it, but we still have a lot of distance to go.
We do. We sure do. I guess the last thing we should say before we do anything else is just, hey, everybody, go get Monkey Business. There's the link right there on the screen.
Yes, I'll make it easier for you people. There it is in sideways. I so love book talk. So you go, I love these book talk people, and I love the way they'll annotate. You'll see the annotations. I mean, serious readers teaching people sometimes in a 5-second review what it means to be a serious reader.
Right. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book? I think my favorite book is The Great Fire by Shirley Hazard.
Okay.
Which probably would stun a lot of people. My favorite book of the past year has been any book by Sally Rooney. Maybe the book that got me writing, I was already writing, but the book that put it into overdrive was Farewell to Arms by Hemingway. So those are sort of signposts along the way. If you want to know what it feels like to be a writer on a bad day, Sally Rooney is certainly mastered it in Beautiful World.
Yeah.
Where did you go? Where are you? Why don't I have you? She really mastered it. Those are all books worth reading, people.
And then what's your next
all
book?
Of them already.
You've hinted at your book, but what's your next one?
The next one is There's the Great Fire by Shirley Hazard. One of the greatest recently passed, one of the most amazing writers ever. The next book deals is another love story that is set in a group of tourists in another country who get caught up in their own conflicts and then see the same conflicts appearing in that other country. I'm being kind of vague because not finished. And at the heart of it is a guy who is falling in love with a girl he's met in this trip and realized that she is destroying herself, may really destroy herself.
Yeah.
Because of this, an irrational ideological faith that she has, and she's in a lot of danger, and he has less than the course of the voyage to save her. But of course, is he right? Who says he's God and he has the right answer?
Right.
So it's a difficult book to write, but I'm passionate about writing it.
I love it. I love it. Well, when you get that one done, come back and we'll do it again.
Thank you. I would really be happy to. This has been a great conversation. We covered a lot of ground, and all of it is really interesting.
And everybody get Monkey Business. Let me put this link up here one more time. There's Monkey Business right there. And stand by for 1 second, Carleton. We'll chat as soon as I wrap this up.
Okay.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much